Morning, Justin.
Good morning, Mark.
How are you, my friend?
I'm well.
Yeah?
Did you get off?
I am. I'm off my soapbox. my pre-podcast soapbox. But, we got to come up with a topic, somehow.
That's right.
Sometimes it's just
I got another soapbox for you to step
Oh,
on.
I'm good. That's good.
Yeah.
Now that I'm down, I can step up on another as necessary.
All right, good. That's how we roll.
Yes, indeed.
We like our soapboxes.
Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. All right, today's soapbox topic. Partly, I want to discuss social media.
Sure.
Kind of the ins and outs, goods to bads. I do think, I think I'd like to get your perspective on it as someone who is sort of anti-social media. I don't know.
What makes you say that? Yeah. What makes you say that I would be anti-social media?
What I don't know is if you're anti or just not present or, kind of uninterested. So that would be one question.
And I would even dare say ignorant.
Or ignorant, sure. Yeah, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think if you're asking my opinion on what I think about social media.
Use your soapbox if you have to.
Let
me pull it up for you.
I'm getting older, so like you say, sometimes it takes me a while to warm up to get up on my soapbox. I can't jump up there like I used to.
I don't know, you just jumped off one, so I think you can jump back on.
That's fair enough. I think social media is
of the devil.
No.
Sorry.
I think, like most things, it can be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
I think there's that aspect to where people can reach out. I think it's to be able to connect with family, to stay, and granted, we can argue, is it really connection? Or is it just an aspect of, false interaction? Because I'm only sending you, or you only see the good stuff.
I'm writing that down for the something to continue talking about, but keep going.
Yeah, so I put out there everything that's good, and therefore it's not really authentic. That would be my thing. To where, for me personally, I would sooner have a face-to-face interaction with 5 good friends in the process of a week than be connected, air quotes, to 200 people and, only seeing partial glimpses. That's how I would see that. And yet, I think it's a tremendous marketing tool. I think it's a great way to be able to, convey information. Maybe not always full truth. And I think, the factors of, what do you call it? Where, not clickbait, but where you get the stuff that you click on and I get the stuff that I click on. And, it's basically geared towards you getting the information, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Information
silos, that whole thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's a concern to me, because it's just very difficult, I think, in some ways to find truth. And I don't think social media is a source for that in most cases.
Yeah.
So, that's just a little.
You don't trust your cousin Fred's opinion about all things?
There are very few.
I hope you don't have a cousin Fred. Maybe you do.
There are very few sources on social media that I would take to heart. Mm-hmm. And, even especially my quote unquote cousin Fred, is that what it was? Yeah. Not uncle, but cousin.
Cousin Fred.
Yeah. I would also recognize that he is probably, speaking from his, clickbait soundbite information as well.
Yeah.
And it just isn't enough. I think I think basically social media is a great way to affirm things or do announcements for things that I want to draw attention to. You know, I think of people, you know, that do it well. It's like, yeah, they're celebrating things, birthdays, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, hey, and this is coming up. You're welcome to join us type stuff, you know, kind of that announcement type dynamic.
Meaning you can appreciate that use of social media. Is that kind of what you're saying? Okay,
of course.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. And, you know, and in some cases, I think, you know, it does that kind of thing. It replaces a newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
you know, upcoming events
Mm-hmm.
type thing.
Yeah, it's more
You know.
like a social newspaper. Essentially.
Yes.
Sure.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Okay.
And yours?
Well, I have lots of thoughts on it. I mean, I'm a millennial.
Yep.
At least on the kind of the end of millennials.
I am not.
And yeah, so I grew up on the internet. I grew up on AOL Instant Messenger and all those kinds of things, and MySpace, and then, you know, moving into Facebook and Twitter and all those things. And for you know, quite a while, Twitter was my favorite place. I loved Twitter. I loved keeping up with it. I still enjoy it, but I don't know. I've kind of put it down. I think I talked about this previously in another podcast, but during the election race where Trump was running for president, it became very difficult to stay on Twitter just because it was so angry. There's so much anger, both directions, and it wasn't what it used to be for me. Like all the people that I enjoyed following for the reasons I followed them, technical expertise and kind of the WordPress world, all of a sudden had opinions on politics, which, don't get me wrong, they're entitled to their opinions. It's just that I realized, maybe I'm not interested in everybody's opinion about politics, because that's what Twitter became, was the political discourse. And that's not why I was there. So I ended up stopping reading, contributing, and it's kind of been that way ever since. And I use it every once in a while, but, a little bit sad to me at the time. Now I look back and just recognize, like, I spent way too much time on Twitter. It was kind of an addiction. I'd have to keep up with my feed, you know, get to the top of the feed, you know what I mean? In order to feel like my day was complete, I had to catch up, that kind of thing. I guess maybe like a newspaper you'd get on your front door. It's like, you got to read that today. And you know, I don't know, you kind of make, you know what I mean?
I do. And I was thinking about that as a progression, I think that's another frustration for me. It's almost, to me, it's almost like fashion. It's like, by the time I, you know, purchase something new, it's already out of date from a fashion standpoint. And I feel very much that way about social media. To where by the time I do get on Facebook, it's like things have already moved to Instagram, you know, and Twitter's been around for a while, but I think it's very much that way. The platforms, or, you know.
You're not ready for TikTok is what you're saying?
Yeah. You know, it's like, short of you.
I'm probably dating myself. TikTok's probably like the dumb thing now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, you know, it's like, even, you know, with Slack, you know, it updates, you know, I got on it and it's like, and then, you know, it's like, well, now we're going to this format, and it's like, nah, I just prefer to kind of let that stuff go on. You know, I might check Marketplace, you know, from Facebook, you know, for a washer dryer or something like that. Yeah. But that's really, and it's ironic and that's that really I even have a podcast. I'm part of a podcast. Well, you know, because I see those two kind of connected.
Yeah. And I think that's a big reason I put it in here, just kind of because of conversations we've had about social media, and due to the desire to figure out how to properly promote this podcast, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And there's no questioning that social media is a huge part of marketing in this world, right?
Agreed.
And if you don't do social media, I mean, you're missing a pretty significant opportunity.
Agreed.
And so I want to go back to the thing you said about false interaction, because, well, for one, my question would be, and I think I know the answer, but just I want
fire away
to hear you say your answer. Do you believe that all of those interactions are false?
All of them, I think, well, That's a good question.
Well, can I give you some for instances?
Of course.
For instance.
Of course.
So like, your niece that you haven't, you
Sure.
you were with them up until a certain time. Maybe you moved away.
Mhm.
Maybe this is true. I don't know, but and she's having a baby, and then they posted on Facebook, and you see that post, and you have this warm, loving feeling that says, "Oh, I'm so happy for them. I want to congratulate them."
Sure.
Is that interaction false?
I would say it's not false. I personally would be disappointed if I found out from Facebook, because that would be a reflection on my relationship with my niece. And for me personally,
I'm not going to say that's how you found out, but that's kind of
but I'm just
how you got a lot of pictures that you maybe not personally wouldn't have got texted.
I think are a great opportunity, like you say, that kind of thing. And yet, for me personally, I would sooner shoot my niece a text and say, "Hey, thinking of you," that kind of thing, versus being one of 65 replies that basically said, "Oh, very nice," that kind of thing. It's just, and so no,
I think that's
not
okay.
All
by the
interactions,
way. I'm just asking,
all interactions are false.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, many interactions are so limited or so biased to a degree of only one aspect of my life, to where I don't think it's real intimacy from the aspect of being reciprocal or having a balanced perspective. That's where I would use the word false. Yeah. Or it's propped up.
So another thought I had just as you were saying all that is we just discussed listening last week, right? It was last week, I think, right? Yeah. No, that we released it today.
Sorry, I was going to say. Yes.
I get them all mixed up.
It's all good.
But anyway, a big component of relationships is listening.
Sure.
And
reciprocation.
Listening is this idea of paying attention to what you're saying without trying to interject my own things, right? Like, that was a very quick summary of some of the things we talked about. And I think for me, seeing what people are putting on Facebook or whatever social media is an opportunity to listen without necessarily injecting my thing, which, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who go to Facebook to interject their thing.
Sure.
I'm just making a point in terms of my way of what I don't consider false interaction. I consider seeing what people are posting.
Sure.
And kind of trying my best to fight Facebook's curation with my own, to say, these are people I want to see. These are people updates I want, because I want to be aware of what's happening in their life. In a sense of something that they are saying, these are things I want to share.
Sure. And information gathering, if you will. Not just information, but updates.
I mean, that sounds so sterile. I think it's about relationship. It's about listening. For me, it's about connection. Yeah.
Sure.
And not in a false way. And when I see them the next time, I can say, that was so cool. You got to see your daughter graduate from high school and be at that event and see her get awarded that thing. Sure. That's awesome. Congratulations, And to see them go, wow, you were listening, right? Sure. That's no different to me than other opportunities for listening, where you can show somebody that I care about you because I'm listening.
Sure.
And I can repeat back what you said, and you go, wow, you really listened to me. You care about me. And for me, I think that is an aspect of social media that can be leveraged and is a positive thing and is not false in any way to me. It's part of a broader relationship.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
So keep going.
No, and that's and I guess that's where you're using it to add to a current relationship. And I think it's it's one of those things to be able to say, I have an ongoing personal relationship in addition to this social dynamic. That, and I guess that's where I come from. It's like, if I haven't talked with you in 20 years and I'm just following you on Facebook, to me, that seems a little more false to actually that would be that kind of dynamic. And so I appreciate the question, because I don't want it to seem like it is disingenuous in the person's desire to connect as you convey.
Mm-hmm.
I just recognize that in some ways it is partial.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Yeah.
But I appreciate the way you're defining it in such a way that says, yes, it's an opportunity for me to be aware, to listen in some ways to other people, in addition to what I have from a face-to-face interaction as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think, a big part of this too is understanding that social media relationships are partial ones, like you said.
Sure.
Because I do think there are many, many people who put too much stock in the way that relationship is because of social media.
Sure.
Which is, I think putting, yeah. Well, it will let you down, right? I think that's a truth. The other thing, so another thing I was thinking about is, again, I get the sense from you that if you don't have a prior relationship, then any relationship in social media is false. And here's my examples for that.
Okay.
Again, going back to Twitter. So I began following a bunch of people in the WordPress community on Twitter.
Okay.
So WordPress is a software, open source software that anyone can contribute to, anyone can use.
Sure.
And there's kind of a passionate following around it.
Okay.
And it was pretty small. I don't know, pretty small is probably not quite accurate, but it was fairly unknown by the normal person when I started following that community and started getting involved. And now WordPress powers like 50% of the internet. So,
Neat.
I mean, it's a big deal. It's everywhere.
Sure.
But the point is, I started kind of following that trend and then seeing the influencers, as the word we use now. It wasn't a word then, but basically people in that community who kind of had some influence in terms of WordPress. Either they were really good at building things with it.
Sure.
And I wanted to be good at building things with it, so I kind of follow them and see what their thoughts were, how they would share things like, here's a cool thing I learned today. And I'm like, wow, that's a cool thing I learned today now.
Yeah.
Or they would share things like, WordPress, we need it to do this, contribute here if you think you agree or whatever, you know what I mean? And so starting to get involved in that community, and it's a genuine community. And so I started to get involved in that and started to build relationships. I'd respond to some things on Twitter or whatever.
Sure.
And then go to their blog posts and maybe leave a comment and vice versa. Like we started build these interactions, right?
Right.
I don't know if you'd call it a relationship yet, but it was certainly the beginnings of it. And then as time went on, I've been to many WordPress events called WordCamps.
Sure.
And it's basically a nerd camp, right? It's like
I was just thinking that it's a bunch of kids at summer camp playing. It's the IT guys summer camp.
Exactly. Rather than like
no offense
arrows.
to IT guys. Yes,
that's right. Us IT guys rule
not,
the world,
it's
Mark.
just, so. No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm just messing. No, but anyway, so starting to go to these events, and then these people I've been interacting with, for a period of time. Now I get to see them face to face.
Sure.
And so now you're connecting, and you go, wow, you're that person. It's nice to meet you. And yet it's like, but we kind of met because we've been talking or whatever. And so I say all that to say it can go the other direction in the sense that a real relationship can bloom out of a social media built relationship.
We need another word for real.
Well,
a real relationship.
Yeah,
I would call that face to face. You know what? Because I'm not saying the relationship that you had isn't real in the context of.
That's what I hear, Mark. It hurts my feelings.
I do not mean to hurt your feelings, and that's where I would come back to. It's not that it's not real. And yet I would say from my perspective, there's just so much more to who a person is And I don't think that can always be conveyed. And, you know, this is maybe another time for another, but, you know, in our, you know, I'll call it electronic dating world, we know in some cases, you know, that electronic relationships or social media are not as real, for lack of authentic, as face-to-face relationships.
Let's use the word whole.
I like the word whole.
It's not a whole relationship.
Yes.
Because I think I really like what you're saying, which is you can mine pretty deeply in a few facets of a relationship through social media, but to be able to say you have a whole relationship with that person is pretty incorrect. Although I would argue you can build a whole relationship from one started in social media. And that's what I'm saying.
And I guess that's what we're in agreement. It's started. I would say it's very difficult to have a whole relationship if it's based on social media interaction alone. Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually a very wise cautionary type thing to say, in a sense of, if you are putting all your eggs in the social media basket, in the relationships there,
yes,
and you're like, no, me and this person on the other side of the world, we're like this, we're tight, we know each other. Just a caution to say, there's only so much you can know. And I mean, just think about, spouses cheat on each other all the time.
Sure.
And you don't see it. Right?
No,
And these are like in-person relationships. Just imagine a relationship where you don't actually see the person.
Yeah.
Hardly ever.
Yeah.
And to kind of add to what you're saying in terms of that whole relationship, I think that's what started to happen with the election processes. Like,
sure,
I had a pretty good idea who a lot of these people were, but when that came out, it's like, oh, but you're also that.
Right.
And by that, it's kind of that polarizing, viewpoint. But it's like, you're willing to say that in that manner and with that much anger. Okay, now I know more about you. And I'm not sure I'm interested in hearing more of what you have to say about that.
Sure.
And yet that's now the thing that you're primarily focused on saying.
Yep.
And it was like, I really enjoyed this relationship with this person. The half relationship I had, the full, as it fleshes out more fully, I'm like, I don't know if this person and I would get along in a whole relationship on a long-term period.
Exactly.
Although I would also make the argument that when we have these conversations, like we've talked about, that's the whole point of this podcast, right? Is having conversations to bridge the gap between polarized viewpoints. It's possible that relationship could have been better in person because we're able to have those conversations.
Well, and I think in the adverse, we have terminology. When you were talking, catfish comes to mind, as far as, how considering the ability to reach out to so many people, if I want to be inauthentic, I can appeal to people, a broad spectrum of people that I wouldn't have been able to do.
Or very specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. To where, I think so,
that's very good.
That's another aspect of social media that isn't always so great. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying, cause those are that's terminology that I've only recently learned about myself, Can
you define that? Catfishing? As you understand it?
As I understand it, it would be, an appeal to get to know someone under an assumed identity. And that my reason for getting to know them would be to create a connection in such a way that I would ask you for something
to earn your trust,
to build your trust to where you might give me what I'm asking for, whether it's money, whether it's, sending my son, you build a story basically on an assumed identity to have people give you what you desire.
Yeah. And there are even more nefarious things like asking them to come meet you and whatever. Yeah.
Right.
There's a semi-documentary / kind of fun, not fun, entertaining type
Exactly.
show on Netflix called The Tinder Swindler.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking of the original show that was Catfish.
Oh, I don't know.
I think there was an original, like it was kind of that comedy type thing where, you know, they're tricking people.
Yeah.
But now, you know, I think that's been adopted.
Okay.
Or, you know.
Well, the reason I bring that up is
Tinder Swindler.
often when we think of catfishing, we think of teenagers. At least that's the perspective I've heard it in the most. Is basically grooming. It's this idea that you're grooming this young, you know, female teenager to say, like, I really love you, and you're pretending to be a slightly older teenage boy, and, you know, oh, you and I are the only ones that think like this, and like you're grooming them, right? And building their trust, that whole thing. And I mean, me, I think catfishing is kind of that version. The Tinder Swindler was about this guy who basically, that's crazy. He basically had this Ponzi scheme where he would contact, you know, a good looking woman on social media and he would prop up this version of himself that looked very rich, prince type thing, whatever. And, you know, he had the money. He would say, you know, I'm going to fly into Prague tonight. If you're willing to meet me, I know it's short notice, whatever. I'd love to take you to this restaurant. It's this insanely expensive restaurant, whatever. And so all of this is social media so far, right? And then they would meet in person and he would bring the goods. Like he would pay for dinner. He would be sweet, whatever. And then the next day, you know, he'd say, oh man, I had this thing come up. My father, you know, he's in trouble. I need to get back to him, but I'll be in touch. And so he would fly out of there, whatever. And they just felt like treated like a princess, right? And then he would do a couple of those with them. And then he would say, oh no, I'm in big trouble. The government they're trying to do a coup with my father or whatever. And all of our funds are locked down. All I need is, you know, $10,000 and tomorrow I will pay you double that. I will get it back to you. We just have to, wow. And they would send him the money. And then sometimes he would pay him double and sometimes, you know, whatever. But he would use that money to pay for the next one.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. And so he had like 3, 4 going on at a time.
Wow.
It was insane. Like, I'm just watching this going, this is a real thing. This isn't fictional. Like, it's really happened. And these women are truly financially devastated because of this guy.
And that's the thing when you were saying teenagers, it's like, years ago, these people were teenagers. Yeah. Now they're your age. Now they're my age.
And that's why older. I wanted to bring up that show.
Yeah.
It's because just, I guess, adding to your point, which is, you can still be catfished and be 52 or 70. Exactly. I mean, even more likely if you're 82 or I was like, oh, this poor boy.
Yes.
You know, that kind of thing. And that's, it's just very important to know that.
No doubt.
I think that kind of ties into what you're saying about
and I think
whole
that,
relationship.
Yes, I think like anything, you know, money, for example, can be a great tool and used in the correct way. And it can also be a root of evil, if you will, you know, that kind of thing. And I think social media has that very same potential. Yeah. It can be used for building up and it can be used for tearing down.
Yeah. And I mean, there are several aspects that you hit on of negative aspects to it, right?
It's probably one area that I am more negative than
That's okay. I mean, that's why we're talking, right? This is something we're actually semi-polarized, right? So we
probably
can
more
have
so.
A conversation about
more
it.
So, yeah.
I think we, as we get older or as we corroborate on this podcast, we become more centralized. And I think that's been part of our journey to where.
Well, I think our relationship has become more whole. Because I see where you're coming from, and I can be influenced by that. Even in a reluctant manner.
Sure.
You know, and at some points it's like, you know, that's probably not where I'm going. that kind of thing. Or I'm kind of like that puppy on a leash that doesn't want to walk. It's like all 4 feet, just planted firmly. And if I'm going to move, you're going to have to do some, you're going to have to drag me to a certain degree. But, I can come along. But yeah.
That's why I don't see Mark's Twitter account promoting this podcast.
That's right.
It's that puppy with all 4 legs.
So if you notice, if there comes a day when I get a Twitter account, it's because Justin has finally convinced me that I should get one to,
or I've started one under your name.
Yes. Yes. That's more likely at
Mark,
this point.
Trust me.
Exactly.
Oh man. Okay, but
but coming back.
Yeah, another one you mentioned was information silos and or confirmation bias is what you.
Confirmation is what I said. Information silo.
That's my term.
Yes.
Essentially, the reason I bring up information silos is because there is actual algorithmic proof that is
nice
a
job.
Thing. Thank you. I think I worked through that word.
Yes.
Where essentially they build algorithms to make sure you stay fat and happy
in your silo.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, this person agrees with me, this person agrees with me, and you get more and more happy with this place is great, right?
Which adds to the polarization.
Right. But and they're just from a business perspective, social media business, their money is an engagement, right? So you being on their platform. And because when you're on that platform, they can show you ads. And when they show you ads, they get paid, right? So the more they can keep you engaged on that platform, the more they can get paid. This goes for news as well.
Sure.
Right? News channels, CNN, Fox News, right? The longer you're staring at the screen, the more commercials you see.
Yep.
If you go to the New York Times or, Washington Post website, right? The longer you're there, the more they're getting paid by their advertisers. And some of them have different models. New York Times, I appreciate that they have a subscription model as well.
Sure.
So they're not completely subsidized by your eyeballs looking at that ad.
Sure.
But the point is, that's how most things on the internet work. If it's free to you, they're getting paid somehow. Or they wouldn't exist, right?
Sure.
And so it's so important to understand that as a consumer of social media. That how does this company get paid and how am I kind of playing into that system? Now, again, I don't think social media is terrible and shouldn't be something we leverage. I think it is a powerful tool. But I think it's so important to understand how it works. And so what they want is they want you to be engaged. The way you're engaged is saying, yeah, that's right, this is how this works or whatever, or getting angry. And so either direction keeps you engaged, right?
Sure.
And so they're going to feed you information based on what they know you like, based on what they know you agree with, based on the friends that you have or whatever. They're going to give you, hey, you should check out this group, or you should, or they'll share a post, right? That's not any of your friends. It's just an ad or something else. And it might be an ad for something and you're like, yeah, I agree with that thing. And you might follow that thing, right? They're helping you build this silo of information.
Sure.
And this silo is filled with all the things nice that you like, right? It's this nice little structure you're building of information that supports everything you agree with, laughs at everything you disagree with, right? And you don't have to be active for that to happen.
Sure.
They're designing the system to do that. In fact, you have to be active to try and break through that silo. And most people, number one, don't, ignorance. And again, if we reiterate what ignorance is from previous episodes, it's not about being stupid. It's about not knowing that a thing is happening.
Being aware.
Being aware, yeah. So I think ignorance just allows that silo to be built for free.
Sure.
Right? And then on top of it, just our innate desire to be agreed with or have, kind of feel confirmed and confirmation bias, right?
Sure.
That what you said. So all that to say, I think it's so important to keep that perspective in mind when you go there and you say, this person agrees with me or I feel like I'm right, but you know what? I'm also being fed all the things that agree with me and hardly any of the things that disagree. When I hear the things that disagree, it's from someone laughing at it, right? Or you know what I'm saying? It's like if you watch Fox News, anything you hear about any kind of liberal agenda, it's going to be shared to you in derision. Right?
I gotcha. Sure.
Right? For the most part.
I hear you.
It's not neutrally published. And you go to CNN, same thing. Right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be neutrally shared with you as news. It's going to have a spin about how it is. And I think it's just, again, important to understand that that's just how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is not what you're hearing. Like, that's not the summary. That's not truth as a whole. You're missing pieces, and you're stuck in a silo, and you think that you're becoming more and more and more and more right, but really you're just becoming more and more entrenched in what you believe, which may not be right.
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Which can lead to what I would call judgmentalism, or, the ability to be, a desire to be judgmental.
Well, the more right you think you are,
mm-hmm.
the more you look at people who aren't doing the thing that you think is right and think, how stupid can you be?
Yeah.
Look at all this proof.
And I'm curious.
Do you not see my silo, Mark?
I do. I don't see your silo, but what intrigued me about what you were sharing is how to break out of your silo. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about it. Is it breaking out of a silo, or is it just creating a bigger silo to where I have more information, or my information is more broad than biased? And I'd be curious to know from your perspective how an individual could break out of their silo, as you put it.
Well, I think this ties into a lot of our conversations, right? Because that's what this podcast is about. It's about, you're in a polarized silo. Let's break out of it by having a conversation that kind of covers both sides a little bit and says that there is room for both. There's a spectrum here.
I gotcha.
And I think that's part of it is, starting to embrace the idea that there's a spectrum about this issue, and I'm on this side of the spectrum, but there's other people on the other side of the spectrum, and they're not idiots.
Sure.
They have they have their own silo that makes them think I'm an idiot. But come on, we're not both idiots. Right? Look at the other parts of our life and recognize that, no, we're not idiots. We're people who are fully functioning, smart people. We just don't agree on this thing. And we have all this, these silos we built up on both sides that make it very difficult for us to understand the other one.
Sure.
But I think you're right in terms of building, I guess, like you said, increasing the size of our silo, the width of it, right? Requires those conversations, requires the allowing and embracing of information coming at you that isn't your normal silo.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
You don't have to believe it to hear it, but you can at least listen.
But how would someone do that on a practical basis? In other words, am I just going to click? Am I going to, instead of clicking the Fox news feed, do I click the CNN news feed sometimes? That's kind of.
I would love your thoughts on that.
Well, the whole information silo stuff is a little new to me. I'll be honest with you in that thinking. And I guess that's where I'm coming from is if you were to ask me, what do? I basically distance from social media altogether because it's frustrating to me. I'm not a person who likes ads, and I want to be, I'm like the old version of what a male shopping is. I go on to get what I want to do and I hop off.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I am. I go to, Amazon if I'm looking for a mower belt or a part for that. And I'll go to Facebook if I'm looking for a used appliance on Marketplace. And, if you ask my family, that's pretty much the extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had eras where I've tried to be involved, but it's like for me in Facebook, that kind of thing. And granted, I know technology has evolved to other, it is all of the ads and stuff that I don't want to see. And I realize I'm on a free, interaction type stuff. So that's how people get paid. But it's like, and I'm just being fair. I don't even watch TV.
Yeah.
For that same thing. Cause we'll stream some shows being perfectly honest, but
you're zeroing in on the social media aspect, but really you asked the bigger question, right? Which is how you break out of your silo. And well, at this point, this is a bigger question than just social media,
Sure.
right?
I suppose, yeah.
So then you have, ideas in terms of besides social media, because I think
Well,
that
I was
would
curious.
be part of your argument, if knowing you as a person would be, well, get out of social media and meet some people, right? Like, I think
That's probably more my dynamic. Yes. I'm not, and I hear again, I don't want to be judgmental, but that's how it works for me.
Yeah.
In that process. Yeah. And I would caution, here's the other part of it. I see, and it's part of my job. I see what too much social media interaction does to people from a comparison dynamic.
Yeah. Part of your counseling.
Yes. Part of my counseling is, this whole comparison, trying to keep up with the Joneses type thing. And that, I think that's what confirms that, yes, if I'm only seeing what their vacation in Tahiti or when they went to the Keys or, that kind of thing, it's like, crying out loud, my life stinks in comparison. Yeah. When in reality, that's not the whole story. Right. So I think, that kind of plays into my view of social media. And I think, that's why I would encourage people to say, okay, how do you break out? Whether that's disconnecting as you did at election time, there's just, for you, there was just too much anger there. So it's like, I don't want all that anger oozing into my life via the screen.
And then back onto the screen.
Or back onto the screen, interact into somebody else's life.
Where I'm like, here's why you should, whatever. And it's like, turns out people don't agree with me.
And it just isolates you from them.
Yep.
In that one facet.
Yep.
Of elections and campaigning.
Yep.
And, and I'll be honest, for me, that another part of it is that whole marketing thing. I don't have, I don't want to say I don't have time, but that's my perspective. That's what I think. It's like, I don't want to waste my time basically with all of this ad information.
Yeah.
Whether it's TV, whether it's radio. I think in some ways, that's what makes podcasts, streaming, that kind of thing so appealing to people, is because they can get the information they want to get in a fairly concise manner without all the ads.
Yeah. Yeah. And
go ahead.
No, that's good.
Because it's, and granted, here again, between us, in this format, that's where when I think of, podcasts that have grown and I'm hearing ads this brought to you, that frustrates me just a little bit.
Yeah, because in your mind, it's like, it undermines their, the trust. It undermines
it undermines the trust, but ultimately, I'm just there for what I want to hear.
Gotcha.
And if I'm being honest, there's a part of it that's just instant gratification.
Gotcha.
I don't want to waste my time. I'm here because I want to listen to that person and what they're sharing and what the title of that podcast was. That's what I want. Mm-hmm. But I also have to recognize in a free exchange, there is going to likely be some ads.
Right.
And that's where I tend to become a little more reactive would be the way I would describe that.
I think back to the thing about silos, though, or how to get out or increase. I definitely agree. Yeah, essentially, your solution is I avoid those places
personally.
Social media and news, TV, whatever.
Which is something I'm not necessarily proud of. In the fact of avoiding news, I have to, because
you feel like maybe you're. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, because I'm not saying I'm a well-rounded person in the aspects of politics and government and what current event type stuff.
Yeah,
based on it's like.
So you've accepted the trade-off essentially where you're less informed of the things that you potentially want to care about, want to be informed about.
Not wholly accepted. I wrestle with it.
Gotcha.
I haven't completely accepted it, but I recognize there is a trade-off.
I got you. Yeah, this, goes back to the politics episode we talked about. And
Sure.
kind of, I think that ties into your desire to have an understanding and a say in those kind of discourses, right? Political discourse. I've accepted it. So I'm
Sure.
not, I'm kind of in the other camp, although I'm certainly willing to continue growing and be challenged. And maybe when I'm 50 like you, Mark, I'll feel challenged instead of accepting it. But I don't watch the news. I avoid it at all costs. Part of it is it's boring to me. Part of it is it's just so. I guess I've never been someone to watch the news. My parents didn't watch the news, so it wasn't culturally ingrained in me to do it. And when I watch it, there's a specific tone of voice they have, news anchors, and that bugs the crap out of me. Speaking of transparency, to me that just represents phoniness, because it's like, this isn't really you talking. This is your news version of yourself talking, and now we get to hear the truth because you're using this special tone of voice. Sure. And it's like, I don't. Just everything about it doesn't appeal to me. It pushes me away, and then not only the phony voice, but then the topics. It's just they very specifically pick very polarized topics that kind of cause drama.
Sure,
it's about drama, right? And again, if you understand the business of news, the way they get their money is your eyeballs. The way they get your eyeballs is through things that keep you glued to the screen, right? Like things that make you want to keep coming back. Like, is the hurricane coming or not? It might be huge or whatever. Exactly. And it's like, I got to check in tomorrow and I got to check in every hour because the hurricane might be here in 1 minute, right? Exactly. It's like, no, the hurricane, it's several days out, whatever. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to the news and figure out what it's doing or whatever, but they specifically gear it towards creating this need, I would say addiction towards more drama, more news, more whatever. And they sprinkle in a little bit of fluff, right? Happy stuff that makes you feel like, see, this is a good thing. And they kind of finish with that. So you don't feel like I'm only consuming this negative whatever, but that's what makes you keep coming back. It's not the fluff. You know what I mean? And it's science. Like, you can read about it. Like, it's proven. It's not, I'm not just making this up.
It's interesting you say that because I do tend to read newspapers, and I'll to do that. That's kind of my thing as far as my era, if you will.
Yeah. That's your Twitter.
Yeah, that's my Twitter. Yeah. But it was interesting. I was reading an article how the certain aspects of news media is policing other aspects, because they were talking about how breaking news, the terminology breaking news, is no longer authentic. So it is leading to that, because breaking news is that draw, that hook. And yet it's been so overused that now it's not even a thing anymore. Well, it's a thing, but yet it's more likely a lie than it is the actuality of this has just happened. No. There's very few avenues for true breaking news anymore. And I would say one of those would be an investigative report that's been under wraps for a long period of time. And now they're bringing it out, right? Like, sure. But real life events, like usually you have social media posts about it way before the news. Like someone's there on the ground, look what just happened, and they post it, it goes viral, and then the news sees the viral post and they go, yeah, we need to talk about that. Right? Yeah. That's kind of like our podcast,
Yeah, exactly.
This is not breaking news, folks.
No, that's right. We don't claim it is. So exactly. At least we got that going for it. But yeah. Phew. Good stuff. I can't remember. I guess we were talking about silos, but I think
I talked about the shift. I apologize. I shifted it to the breaking news, and you were talking about what it came back to as far as the sources.
I think the genesis of this long rabbit trail was essentially, how do you increase the size of your silo? What are some techniques? And you basically say, well, I avoid the news and I avoid social media, which I think is a viable solution if you're looking to decrease the height of your silo so you're not so entrenched in what you believe. You have all this evidence stacked by all these social media posts and all these news articles and all these, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And increase the width of it by talking to your neighbor who is the other, they're left wing, you're right wing, or you're left wing and they're right wing. And, and they have opinions and thoughts, but they're also your neighbors, so they want to be friendly and they're able to have some discourse there and be able to go, you know, the people who think that, they're not so bad.
Sure.
You know, and having those real life conversations with real people.
Yeah. So your information silo stuff, then, that you're willing to recognize that's not just social media terminology. Right. Yeah. Okay. Now yeah.
Yeah. But what is semi unique to social media is that they have the tools to figure you out and feed you more. The algorithms, right? Right. So that's unique in the terms versus like the news. They know their demographic pretty well, obviously. They know what sells, right? They know what increases, but they don't know your interests. They don't have all this information about you that you're willingly dumping into their system every day. Right. Through your contributions, right? Through what you like, through what you buy, through all this stuff. Where social media has that information and then they can use that information to feed you back. So it's kind of regurgitating. And,
So we're going to have to do this probably for another time. But as you were sharing, and this isn't as you shared your view of the news, your perspective was basically that it's boring and inauthentic. Yeah. And I'm curious how you see even younger millennials or I'm curious how you see them being aware of what is happening. Because I do believe, you know, what governments are doing. I do believe, you know, what decisions leaders are making, what Congress is doing, what legislation, you know, I do believe that's an important thing from my perspective. And I'm curious if a younger version of me who tends to want to disengage from that, that to me concerns me regarding government. You follow me? It's okay if it's another topic, but that's what's coming to my mind in that dynamic of if I'm just trusting those individuals to make these decisions that are in my best interest, and I'm not oblivious, complacent, maybe a combination of ignorance is bliss. Yeah, that's concerning to me.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think that's acceptable. I can't speak to the big thing there. I mean, we could talk about that, and I think, like you said, we might not have time for that. But I can speak personally and just say that my life's been fine without having news in my life and knowing the current events. Because if a hurricane's coming, I know because all my friends talk about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. If, you know, some political thing's happening, I'll find out because Megan's client's at work. She's a hairstylist. She's going to come home and say, my clients wouldn't stop talking about this thing. And I'm going to find out, right? I have never been wanting for information about current events or neither has any of my credibility in any facet of my life been undermined as a result of not knowing what's quote unquote going on politically. And I think that the concerning part is that, as we discussed in the politics episode, is that we're probably should have a presence in kind of the political discourse as believers, as people trying to represent the right side, right? Or whatever, which is, you know, obviously very
polarizing.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I would just say, yes, I think somebody should be doing that. It's just not me right now. Yeah.
And I think that's where I'm at is that difference between a proactive stance and a reactive stance. Because if I'm just finding out after it's happened, that from my perspective, that can demonstrate an irresponsibility
Yeah.
from my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not saying someone.
My response to that would be the way that I contribute to the world.
Mhm.
Like I'm very involved with Celebrate Recovery.
Sure.
And to me, that is a much better way to create change in a cultural wave
I hear you.
than jumping on a political soapbox. I believe that the fundamental changes that can transform a person from an addict to someone who gives back to the community
Sure.
is fundamentally going to be a greater win socially, politically,
Sure.
over time than whatever I might try to do on a political spectrum.
Sure.
Again, this is unique and personal to me, the way I feel I'm meant to be contributing.
Sure.
Where I think other
grassroots versus a global perspective.
Exactly. I believe that I'm at the grassroots level working on helping someone get out of addiction so that they can even contribute in any meaningful way to society, right? Like that's where I want to be.
Sure.
And I joke about not, I can't control anything that's going on, whatever. It's like, no, that's not true. I believe this matters.
I hear you.
And I believe that for my kids' sake, the work I'm doing is going to benefit them more than whatever I could do. Because I don't think I have what it takes to be in that other avenue trying to do good work. I just don't think I have the patience for one.
Gotcha. The platform is another dynamic of that. It's like, what platform have I been given?
Yeah.
And do I use that to its fullest potential?
Yeah.
Not use it in a negative sense, but is that where my energy is mostly used in a way that, I can have, and I appreciate you sharing that dynamic. And that's not to say that, people who are involved on a global scale or a larger, political scale, that's not to say that that isn't the platform they've been given.
Correct.
So, but I'm hearing where you're coming from. And I think we all have that opportunity, starting with social media. As we started with social media, we bring it back to the relationships we have and the influence we have. And being able to use all of those aspects, for a kingdom purpose, if you will.
Yep. And I think just last thought there, we should be careful about how we consume social media. We should also be careful about how we leverage social media and treat both of them with a full understanding of how it works and why we're doing it in order, like you said, to leverage his kingdom.
Sure.
If that's where you're at, right?
Yeah. And even leverage can be a yes.
But that
polarizing dynamic. Yeah.
We're right at our time marker.
So
we can't keep going, but we would. We totally would.
We just came up with a few more topics.
Cool.
So that's how we see it. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.